Okay, hello everyone who is tuning in to this info session on the online course coming up here pretty soon called Legal Basics for Forming Communities. And we're here with the instructor of this course, Clifford Pollen. And we're gonna make lots of space for you all to ask questions about the course, find out if it's a good fit for you or not. We're gonna share all the details, all of the information about what's gonna be included in the course, who it's a good fit for, what you can expect. And I'm sure Clifford will also, in answering a lot of your questions, be able to give a little bit of guidance if you are in the position of thinking of starting a community, or maybe you are already in a group that's forming an intentional community, be it an eco-village, co-housing, any type of co-living setup. I think we've heard over and over again that the legal barriers are often the most challenging piece for a community to overcome to actually get off the ground. And that's why this course is so important. And I really think one of the first of its kind to delve deeply into the legal aspects, specifically zoning regulations, membership processes, legal structures for actually creating an intentional community. So I'm very excited for this session, and thanks for everyone. If you were with us last week when we had a little bit of a snafu, thank you for coming back. And I'm going to start things off by sharing my screen. I have a short presentation just so we can go over some of the basics about the course itself, and then Clifford's going to share more about the content. So here we are for the info session, and this is for the Legal Basics for Intentional Communities online course starting on April 21st. And that's when the first class will be. We do have an early bird discount that it ended yesterday, but we have been giving this discount to people who are trying to register today because of the info session mix-up. So if you're still wanting to get that early bird discount, you can write to me directly at cynthia@ic.org, and I'll put my email address in the chat. But we'd love to get you in since we're kind of doing this info session once again. And here's a little bit about the course structure. So it is a 5-week-long course, and each week there's a 2-hour live session with Clifford and the other students in your cohort. We cap all of the courses at about 40 participants, so it tends to be a pretty small group. And the sessions are not held on Zoom webinar, which is what we're in right now. They're actually held in Zoom meeting mode. So you get to see all of the other participants. We can put you into breakout groups, really make a very interactive and close networking experience. We've wrapped up a few courses, and after the 5 weeks in, the people who are on these sessions really get to know each other. And I think that's one of the great benefits of taking a course with FIC. Not only are you learning all this information, but you're also going through this experience with people around the world who are starting intentional communities. And towards the end, it kind of feels like we are building that community. And there'll be homework assignments every week, a forum that we've set up for more networking between the sessions, and dedicated support. I do think that this is one of the best ways that we can support you and your group in getting off the ground and navigating legal structures specifically. Here's a quick look at the schedule. So as I mentioned, each week there is one 2-hour long class, and all of the classes are on Wednesdays. So starting on April 21st with legal structures for community land holdings. And I think Clifford has a really nice progression of different topics that cover kind of the spectrum of what you'll need to be thinking about to successfully get your community set up. And Clifford can talk more about these topics in detail. And we also have each week, in addition to the 2-hour-long classes, these bonus sessions, which are part of our normal event series with FIC. So these are public events that we give you free access to as a course participant. So we have our monthly Community Connect networking session. Then we have a session on co-buying property to start a community with Danielle Williams of Dancing Rabbit Eco Village in Missouri. Then legal models for intentional communities, a panel discussion. We're going to be bringing in intentional community residents, different legal advisors to kind of have more of a roundtable discussion on legal models for communities specifically. And then lastly, will be an intro to community land trusts, kind of a deep dive into community land trusts as a model with Karen Stupski. And all of that information, plus a lot more, is available at ic.org/legal-course, and our scholarship applications are there. We have a pretty robust scholarship program, and we've been able to help out a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford the course. And everyone who donates, everyone who pays the full price helps make that scholarship program possible. So it's been a really wonderful win-win all around for our network to be able to get as many people this experience as we can. All right, so that's all that I have. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Clifford share a bit about himself, and then we'll open it up to questions. And Clifford, just really appreciating you for being here, for offering this course, for sharing all that you know. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, and thanks for having me, and thanks everybody who's here on the call today. And again, I would just say mea culpa for the mix-up last week. I had it written in my calendar for a different time, one of these time zone strange issues, and I apologize, and I appreciate people showing up here today. So just a little bit about who I am and what I bring to this class, and then I think Cynthia and I will do some questions about what's in the class specifically. But yeah, my name is Clifford Pollen. I am an attorney licensed to practice in the state of California. I do a lot of work in different areas of transactional law, and I have been working kind of as a niche in the intentional community realm for about the last 12 years. I've worked with communities of different scales and in different jurisdictions. Many of them are rural, but I have worked with folks in the more suburban and urban areas. And I also live on land with folks. So I've got some experience in the lived experience of the joys and challenges of community as well. The virtual background behind me there is the land that we steward here in unceded Northern Pomo territory, otherwise known as Potter Valley in Mendocino, California. Mendocino County, California. We're a couple hours north of San Francisco. I really love doing the work that I do with people in community because I believe in it. I think it's a multi-generational process, moving us from the hyper-individualized world that most of us were raised in here in the so-called United States towards a greater living of our values of shared resource use and shared stewardship. And I really hope to be a bridge between people that are wanting that and the legal structures in which we exist in, and helping people create legal structures that codify and make real their values and missions that they hold for the work that they want to do in the world, and hopefully avoiding as many pitfalls as possible throughout the process. I have taught a couple classes now with FIC, which were really fun. I did sort of a big survey course last year, and then I did a course on buy-in and buyout provisions. And so some of what I'm bringing to this is what I've learned through teaching to FIC students so far and getting some really great feedback from folks. And I'm really excited for this format, which I think the other classes that I've done have kind of been the fire hose method of me laying out as much information as I could cram in 2 hours and hopefully people being able to drink it And I'm hoping this type I can titrate the information flow a little bit more. So I'm excited to have it be able to break out over 5 classes, to go a little bit slower, to ask, to have questions asked, to sort of examine what's happening in a little greater detail, and to hopefully help people work on specific issues. I do just want to say real quick is that this is an online course, and it's not a legal. I'm not acting as a lawyer to folks in this situation. I'm not providing specific legal counsel throughout this. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to do that in a Zoom room with 12 to 40 people. But I can, as to the best of my ability, guide people in the right direction. And depending on where people are at in their process, I also do work with communities and individuals and groups outside of my teaching here at FIC, which I can make my contact information available, and happy to work with folks in that way as well. Let's see just a little bit more about who I am and what I do. I got my law degree from Vermont Law School. So I spent a little time in the beautiful Green Mountain State where Cynthia is right now, many years ago. And I have an undergraduate degree in environmental science from the University of Arizona with a specialty in soil and water science. So it's nice to be able to bring in some of the scientific background to what's going on in the interpersonal realm as well. I helped found an environmental education nonprofit here on the land a number of years ago, and we teach oak stewardship, land stewardship, primarily in the oak woodlands environment. And we also offer educational classes to adults and youth in a variety of different topics. So I have that background, and I find that's helpful. There's a lot of people that come to this work that are looking to further some educational or aspirational vision that they have through the community work that they do. I also have served on a number of nonprofit boards and in some government positions. I'm currently on the Planning Commission for Mendocino County. So we've got one of our whole classes is sort of looking at zoning and land use regulation and how that impacts communities. Because I think, again, it's one of those areas that can get kind of esoteric and overlooked, but I'm hoping to break it down into manageable bites. And yeah, I think that's enough about who I am and my biography. And then if Cynthia's got some questions, or if people have questions, I'm happy to talk about specific classes that are going to be a part of the packet, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you, Clifford, and thanks for sharing about your mission, like in doing this work, to be that bridge for people and with the legal and the community. And it's just such important work. So yeah, more kudos to you. And it's also to reiterate for folks what you said about how this course is not intended to be legal advice or considered as legal counsel, but that is a service that Clifford does offer on the side, and you may want to take him up on it. And do have your questions. Feel free to post those in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And you can also use the raise your hand button if you'd like to share your question out loud. And if you're tuning in on Facebook, go ahead and write your questions into the comment box for this recording, and we'll get to those as we can. And I want to just kick things off with a question for you, Clifford, about who you feel this course is ideally suited for. Like who could you really see as benefiting maybe the most from this course?
Sure. I would say probably the most beneficial would be people who are either sort of envisioning, thinking about starting an intentional community, or at the beginning phases of community formation. It's primarily designed to answer those questions that you would have as you're setting up and forming your entity. That's not to say that if you're further along in the process, there aren't things to learn, and people can always be thinking about modifying whatever structures they currently have, and I'm sure there's something that would be useful in here for those folks. But predominantly it's for people that are in that either getting started or thinking about getting started phase of community. I think it would be great for people to take the class with a group if there are a number of people that are part of your organization, so that as you're doing some of the homework exercises, you all can be hopefully using some of that to spark questions and dialogue between yourselves about what your community wants to look like moving forward. There has been a question about sort of the ideal geographic scope of this, and I would say I think that it is predominantly going to be most useful for people that are inside the so-called United States. That is the area where I have the most expertise. But that's also not to say that if you are in another jurisdiction, that it wouldn't be useful. There are a couple of the classes in particular are going to have a lot of issues that might look and might get codified differently in different jurisdictions, and you don't want to work with a attorney in wherever you're living to make sure that they meet the legal guidelines. But thinking about what are the issues around buy-in and buy-out, about dispute resolution, about decision-making structures, these are all things that are pretty applicable across the board, and I think would be useful. Again, I am aiming this at people that are inside the US, and then in my specific area of the greatest expertise is in the state of California. So some of the things that I might be sharing about zoning and land use, I'll be using specific examples from this jurisdiction, but again, there are analogs across the board in other states. And without specific knowledge, I'm sure that there are areas in other countries where these same kind of issues are at play. And while it might not give you the same level of specificity, at least would give you the issues to be thinking about and asking questions about in whatever jurisdiction you do find yourself in.
Okay. Good. Good to clarify all of that. It looks like Erica has her hand up. So Erica, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, hi. This is kind of a complex issue, so I'm just going to read what I've got written here. It's not very long at all. I'm a member of an existing intentional community in Virginia. We are leasing our land from a CLT. At the moment, due to faulty documents, each member does not own their own home. I am researching ways for each homeowner to own their own home, either through a deed as real property or through a contract as personal property. In either case, the intent is to still have the common land or the entire tract held in trust. We would like to end up with a scenario where it would be possible for the homeowner or buyer to obtain a mortgage. Also, we are not able to meet county subdivision standards. Will your course help us with this?
Well, I would say your time might be better spent working with me outside of this class on that specific issue. There'll be some consideration about community land trusts and as a form that people work with to do intentional community. But I'm not going to get into the level of detail of saying, exactly what the arrangement needs to look like between that land trust and the community, and these specific documents you would want to have in place. Also, again, it sounds like there's some really specific questions that are at play for you between what was drafted by the CLT and the people that are living on site right now, and how that relates to local land use stuff. And so I would say there's probably things that you could benefit from taking the class, but I wouldn't say that I'm going to drill down to that level necessarily where I'm answering that specific question for your group, okay, if that helps.
Yeah. What can I ask what you would charge for an individual consultation?
Sure, I can. Yeah. So when I work as an attorney, my rate is $200 an hour, and I bill by the quarter-hour increment, and it just sort of depends on how much time is spent on a specific case. I don't have a fixed package rate or anything.
Okay. We're interested in different scenarios. Open to suggestion about the best way to to reorganize ourselves.
Sure. Erica, I'll put my email address into the chat so you can have that. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do that, and we can set up a time to do an introductory consultation and see about working together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Erica. And good luck with that complex sounding situation. Yeah. And there are several questions in the chat. And maybe this first one would be good for us to tackle. So Sophie is asking if you, Clifford, could go over briefly what each class will cover beyond the title description. They write that they have a hard time even beginning to wrap their head around what the legal structures are. So that might be helpful for folks. And if you'd like, I could screen share again the classes. Would that be helpful?
Sure. I mean, I have them in front of me here, but if you want to share them just so people can refer to them, that would be great.
Yeah, let's do it. So let me go back. There we are. Okay, go ahead.
Great. So the first class, legal structures for community land holdings, there are a variety of different ways in which people hold land, hold title to land collectively. And I would be examining what those different areas, what those different ways are, why you would choose to select certain models over the other, and some of the considerations and documents that would need to be created by the organization to hold land in those specific forms. The second class, the successful buy-in and buyout provisions, hopefully that one's a little bit more self-explanatory, but one of the most critical areas I've found in working with clients and communities is how do people come in and how do people go out of a community in a way that is both flexible enough and useful enough for the people that are departing, but doesn't endanger the overall health and longevity of the community itself. And there's no magic formula that's here, but there's a number of considerations that are helpful to look at. And so we'll be sort of drilling into why you'd want to be thinking about certain provisions inside of your operating agreement or your TIC agreement or whatever legal form you have for your agreements as a community, and what those look like and what you'd want to make sure is incorporated into that. This third class, dispute resolution provisions. This is looking at the hows and whys you would create certain mechanisms within inside your operating document that allow for how disputes are going to be resolved internally and externally by the community as they come up. Again, I think one of the biggest things that people get into when they start communities is this notion of like, well, we'll just kind of figure it out as we go along. We all love each other and we all trust each other. And that's great. And it also, conflict is a part of human life, and especially when we're living close to people. And so how do we address those issues so that there's a clear understanding at the outset about the process that we're going to use to address those issues. So that's what we'll be talking about there. Class 4 is the zoning and land use impacts on community structure. Again, this will be looking at sort of what are some common zoning and land use issues that face communities. And depending on where you are, how might you need to interface with your local jurisdiction to get the permissions and entitlements that you're looking for to do what you want to do, or what are the limitations on a particular piece of land that you might be looking to develop or to buy into, and how that might influence what the structure of your community looks like, or whatever your community vision is might influence where you end up landing in a specific real estate area, depending on what is possible there. And then finally, the last class of decision-making structures is looking at what are sort of the different governance options that are available. Everything ranging from a simple sort of majority rule to consensus to sociocracy, and when it might be appropriate to have different decision-making processes in place for different decisions, and sort of what the ramifications of using a different decision-making process in different situations can be legally and internally for your organization. So I hope that that covers it. And if you have more specific questions about any of them, please put it into the chat or raise your hand.
Okay, great. That was helpful for sure. And it's interesting because I'm reflecting how some of these topics, particularly decision making, we cover in other workshops and courses. However, it tends to be more the like interpersonal dynamics in decision making and the emotional and the group process. And I'm imagining you're going to be talking about things as they help and support your community as an entity as well. So that'll be great.
Right. And I think it's important to say that those two really can't be divorced entirely, that there always is an interpersonal and emotional aspect to all of these legal issues as well. But I'm hopefully going to be providing some context around why you'd be creating certain agreements and structures inside of your organization from a practical and legal perspective. And I'm happy to also examine what sort of the social and cultural implications and ramifications of those decisions are, because it's important to consider those as well.
Cool. All right. And let's see. Another question from Sophie. I assume after taking this class, a forming group would still need to hire a lawyer and other professionals, but this class will mostly give us an understanding of what the legal needs are. Would you say that's true, Clifford? In most cases, communities end up hiring a lawyer at some point?
I would say that is true, and I would recommend you do that. I think it's helpful to have somebody, or even, ideally you have a group of people that you're working with, both an attorney, perhaps a accountant, maybe depending on what your project is, architects and engineers and other designers, and building your team together. And so, yeah, I think you're correct, Sophie, that this would give you a great place to start. And especially if you're working with an attorney who doesn't have a lot of background in intentional community work, it might help you understand the issues that need to be raised and flagged with that attorney. And I'll also just state that I do work with people that are outside of California regularly, but I always make sure that if there are state-specific issues that are up, that people have local counsel that they can go to as well, because I'm not licensed to practice outside of California, and I'm happy to work with people on a consulting basis outside of California. But if you are not in the state of California, you would probably, even if we were working together, I would advise you to get an attorney. And yeah, again, building your team at the beginning is better than just like, planning is best done in advance. The same is true for getting your team together for this type of endeavor.
Right. Yeah, Karen has been asking if you have familiarity with Oregon and the situation in Oregon.
I mean, I do, and also it's not the area that I practice in, and so if there were state-specific questions around laws or different zoning applications in Oregon, I'd be happy to do some research and work with people on looking at those questions, but I can't answer in a legal capacity a specific legal question about Oregon law. But I'm sure much of what I'm speaking to in California is also applicable in Oregon, and I've worked with clients in Oregon, so I know that that is true.
Okay, good. And thank you everyone for asking these great questions, and keep them coming in the chat. And also feel free, if you want to ask your question out loud, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you to speak. And we'll go to the next question. We have some nice appreciations for this from Lena. And Lena also asks, would this class cover which structures would apply depending on what the goals of the community are, in terms of tax benefits with different income sources, things like, will you go over what structure a group might want to adopt based on the nature and the goals of that community?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think, again, that first class of the sort of the legal structures, a lot of what dictates what structure you're going to have looks at like what the goals of the community are, and who the individuals in the community are, what the financing of the overall group is. And so, yeah, looking at how to make a project fit to the particular needs of the group as it exists right now, and the contemplated needs of future members that might want to join, particularly as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if those are goals that your community holds strongly to, what can be worked into your legal structure that can facilitate that type of onboarding. And yeah, I mean, again, we'll get into a lot of stuff. It's hard to say exactly if it's going to get down to exactly the specific point that you might have with your specific group. And, you know, there are tax implications for high net worth individuals who might want to be, you know, depending if you're using a nonprofit structure, who might be donating. And so there are a lot of particulars, and we'll get down into some of it, but it might not answer every single question that you have. But hopefully it would get you asking the right questions, and then as you're moving forward, finding the right specific answers for your group, depending on what comes up in your exploration.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning communities that may have a goal to be more diverse or more inclusive. That's come up a lot. So it's great that you have some recommendations for how to make that more possible. Awesome. Okay, and now, oh, Heidi has asked, will nonprofit structures be discussed? We're thinking of having land and buildings in an LLC and the business as a nonprofit.
Yeah, definitely. That first class of legal structures will look at nonprofits as one of the potential landholding structures, or as an ancillary structure. And it's a not uncommon situation to have a relationship between a nonprofit and a for-profit entity as it relates to an intentional community. And we can, depending on who's in the class and what the questions are that come up, we can sort of drill down into some of the considerations and issues that need to make sure they're addressed, so that you're not running afoul of any IRS regulations when it comes to the nonprofit. That's one area that can get a little bit thorny, and it's not by no means insurmountable, but it's definitely something to consider. So we will look at that. And as well as looking at as a nonprofit as a potential landholding entity, and what some of the advantages of that particular route are, depending on your situation.
Okay, nice. All right. All right, folks. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. If you do have more questions, please ask them. Want to make sure that you have a good sense here today if this course is a good fit for you, if it's something you want to sign up for or not, or if you should try to find a local lawyer or connect with Clifford outside the course, or maybe you just want to take the course to have that foundational understanding of all the things that Clifford has been mentioning. So yeah, I don't see I'll for sure write in my email again. It's just cynthia@ic.org. Very easy to remember. Yeah, and you can write to me if you have any questions more about the things related to the registration for the course, like pricing, group discounts. Yeah, anything that's more technical is good for me. And I'll be that support person throughout the course. Clifford's just coming in as the instructor. So best to ask me those things. And all right. Well, now if we maybe wrap things up. Yes, and Clifford will be the instructor for the later dates as well. Yeah, this course happening in April, and then also the course happening later on in the year. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well,
Okay.
if there's nothing else, we might wrap up early.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for being here and your questions. I really appreciate it. And I hope to, be meeting a bunch of you here in a couple weeks when the course gets started.
Okay, awesome. Although we did just get a question come through the Facebook space.
Okay.
Curious if rent versus ownership will be covered.
Well, I think we can talk about that in that legal structures course. Typically, mostly the groups that I'm working with, we're looking at them owning and there being an equity component to what we're talking about. But I mean, there are certainly communities that exist on space that they don't own. And if that's something that is of interest to the class, I'd be happy to explore that some.
Okay. Yeah, it's great that all of the classes are live sessions. So for the course that I just went through, we had a lot of time to answer people's questions and kind of adapt the content, because you get to know people and their situations and then sort of adapt it to whatever they're most curious about. So I think that's one of the benefits of these courses and this format in particular. All right, sweet. All right. Well, thank you everyone again for tuning in. Thank you, Clifford, for being here, and hope to see some of you on the course. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.